Today on Sports Central, we'll be going over a coachable game preview and prediction on one of the big SEC matchups coming up in week number 8. And that's going to be between Alabama and Tennessee. And it's been kind of a tale of two teams here. Of course, you got Alabama on one side. They're undefeated, sitting at 4-0, one of the best teams in the nation for sure. And they're trying to keep that going against a Tennessee team which has really struggled lately. They've lost 2 straight games to Georgia and to Kentucky. And they really haven't been close games either. They've been blowout losses to both those teams. And so they're trying to turn around their season with a big win against Alabama, which is going to be a pretty tough one for them. But today we'll be going over a full college football game preview and prediction on this one, starting out with your team trends. And last week, Alabama beat Georgia by a score of 41-24. Great win for the Crimson Tide there. I mean, Georgia being a team that was definitely a top 4 team in the nation last week, probably a top 3 team. All around, that was just a great win for Alabama there. Winning it pretty convincingly, too. They won that one by 17 in the end. So all around, great win for Alabama. And then last week, Tennessee lost to Kentucky 7-34. All around, just a terrible game for the Vols. They certainly should have kept it much closer than that. I was expecting Tennessee to get a pretty good win there against Kentucky, which had never happened nearly as planned. But once again, that was just a terrible game. They also had a bad loss once again to Georgia the week before. So it's been a really rough couple of weeks as far as Tennessee is concerned. And looking at your winning streaks as well, Alabama's currently ranked second in the nation. 4-0 is the record for them, and they've got a 4-game winning streak. Meanwhile, for Tennessee, they're sitting at 2-2 with a 2-game losing streak. So Tennessee and Alabama are definitely on opposite sides of the spectrum as far as momentum is concerned. The game's going to be on Saturday, October 24th, 3:30 p.m. Eastern in Knoxville. So the Tennessee will be the home team for this matchup, which will be good for them. Obviously, home field advantage doesn't mean as much this season, but it's still can at least mean something to Tennessee, I'm sure. Spread currently says Alabama by 18.5, so it's really heavily faced towards Alabama in this situation. ESPN FPI also has Alabama by 92%. Then the Vegas prediction has got Alabama by 22, 46-24 being your final score prediction there faced towards Alabama. So Alabama is favored pretty heavily in all 3 of our sources here, and it's not much of a surprise considering Tennessee is coming off of a really rough last couple of weeks. But Alabama, I think Tennessee definitely has got some potential, and they could easily hang on to Alabama for a chunk of the game coming up in week number 8. I'm not sure that Tennessee's going to win, but I think that they've got a chance to possibly put up a fight against the Crimson Tide in some way during this matchup. Here's your stat comparison as well. Alabama's looking really good in comparison to Tennessee here. They've gotten 49 points per game, 28 points allowed. They also have 393 pass yards a game, 168 rush yards. And as far as yards allowed, they've allowed 309 pass yards, then 149 rush yards on average per game. So all around, I say Alabama is much better than Tennessee. I mean, if you look at Tennessee's side, they've allowed 23 points per game, 29 points allowed, 194 pass yards, 134 rush yards a game. And as far as yards allowed for them, they got 213 pass yards and then 148 rush yards. So honestly, the only difference here is the Alabama passing defense. They've allowed 309 pass yards a game. So that is something that I'd be a little bit concerned about. But then again, Alabama's had to play against Stetson Bennett, a great Georgia quarterback, along with Kellen Mond from Texas A&M. So Alabama has had a bit of a rough schedule so far, which they've done very well against, by the way. But still, as far as yards allowed, Alabama has probably allowed a bit more yards than Tennessee has. But still, I'd say Alabama is better on the stat comparison here. As far as the games that both these teams have played, of course, once again, Alabama beat Georgia 41-24. Also had a big win against Ole Miss, 63-48, and that game it did concern me a little bit about whether or not they beat Georgia or not, because they allowed 48 points to an Ole Miss team which last week was absolutely horrible. So all around, that was a little bit concerning there, but still they did get the win, and they still scored up 63 points. So you can't forget about that. But they also had a good win against Texas A&M. 52-24 was the final score there, and they also beat Missouri, actually doubled them up, 38-19. As far as it goes for Tennessee, once again, they haven't won since October 3rd. They lost to Kentucky last week, 7-34. Lost to Georgia, 21-44. And they beat Missouri, 35-12. And that was after they beaten South Carolina on the road, 31-27. So, other than both teams have had kind of difficult schedules, I'd say Alabama's probably had the difficult schedule here out of both of these teams, considering they've had to play 2 top 15 teams with Georgia and Texas A&M. But both teams have had to play against Georgia, and Alabama certainly was the better team between both of those matchups. So that's something that you do have to look at there as well. Here's some key points. Tennessee had a good start. I mean, obviously, Tennessee I actually had ranked, I think, 10th at one point in my personal rankings. I think that was in week number 5 when they were 2-0. They were looking like a good team at the time, but yeah, Tennessee's definitely dropped off a lot since then after their last 2 losses. And Alabama is definitely one of the 2 main title contenders so far this season. I'd say Alabama and Clemson are definitely your best teams in the nation as of now. And it's going to be fun to see how that fares out as we get into the later parts of the season. But obviously, I'd say Alabama is definitely a top 2 team in the nation right now. They're just playing as well as anyone, really. I mean, even though they let Ole Miss score 48 points on them, still, I think Alabama is a team that needs to be, or that is a force to be reckoned with right now. And I think for Tennessee, it's going to be, they can't make any mistakes. They can't have any turnovers or anything if they're going to beat Alabama in this matchup, because I mean, the Crimson Tide have proven, I mean, on offense, this team is just great. All around, Mac Jones is a great quarterback, definitely one of the best in the nation right now. And their defense has been really improving as well. So Alabama all around is a balanced, really good team right now. And I'd say Tennessee, I mean, they need to play much better defensively. They need to force a couple of turnovers if the Vols are going to win this matchup against a great Crimson Tide team this season. And honestly, there were a few uncertainties for Alabama heading into this season. Of course, they didn't have Tua anymore, so there were questions as to whether or not they'd be okay with not having him around, but they've been doing just fine without him. I mean, Mac Jones has definitely filled his shoes just fine. So, I mean, looking into the rest of the season, I think Alabama is definitely looking really good as far as winning a national championship is concerned. But yeah, Tennessee is definitely a team that I think they got to win this matchup if they're going to want another, or if they're going to want a good season or a good bowl game here in 2020. I mean, this is just an important matchup. Like, you don't want to start out your season 2-3. Like, if you start your season 2-3 like Tennessee's on the verge of doing right now, that is not a good sign for things to come. But here's my prediction for this one. Halftime score is going to be 14-10. Alabama's going to lead it at halftime, but I think in the second half we see a very high scoring one out of Alabama. I think Alabama kind of lets it loose in the second half. They score 4 touchdowns, and they will win this one 42-23. That's going to be your final score here. I think Alabama really pulls away in the second half, and I think Tennessee will be hanging around in the first half. I think it's going to surprise a lot of people how much Tennessee will be hanging around. But I think, once again, Alabama is just too good for the Vols in the end. They're going to get the win by just around 19 points. Your final score, 42-23. And I think Alabama all around, once again, is just too good of a team right now for a Tennessee team that has really been struggling. And as far as momentum is going on both of these teams, Alabama's got all the momentum in the world right now. They're coming off of a great win against Georgia. I think that's going to carry on into this week quite a bit. I mean, if you look at Tennessee, on the other hand, they got blown out by Kentucky last week by 27 points, and they also got blown out by Georgia the week before that. So all around, Tennessee just has got nothing going for them as far as momentum is concerned. So I've got Alabama winning this one once again by a good 20 points. 42-23 is going to be your final score. But do let me know your thoughts and comments below on this matchup. Let me know your score predictions, team predictions, etc. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this one. But then again, thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed this preview, slap a like on it, subscribe as well. Really upset the channel, really appreciate that. But as always, thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.